legacies I leave behind is a hard worker, that we've really focused on putting policy over politics. I feel like that's really still in place, and we've got 30 legislative days to make sure that that continues to be the case.
Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan on his leadership and his legacy on this, his last session as president of the Georgia State Senate. Good evening and welcome to Lawmakers on this 11th day of the legislative session. I'm Donna Lowry. We'll have much more of my interview with the Lieutenant Governor coming up. He's had success in garnering bipartisan support for his legislative priorities with public safety and foster care. I also asked him about sending the Buckhead Cityhood bill to a Senate committee led by Democrats. Also tonight, a deeper dive into what sponsors call the Save Girls Sports bills in both the House and the Senate. As always, though, we check in first at the Gold Dome with Capitol correspondent Brenda Waters. Hi, Brenda.
Hey, Donna. Everyone's seeing red today in the House and the Senate. Legislators wore red to celebrate the American Heart Association's National Wear Red Day, promoting heart health. And Democrats were also seeing red in the House, but for a completely different reason. The House passed HB 873. Now, that's the measure that would revise the district boundaries for the Gwinnett County Board of Commissioners. Representative Bonnie Rich introduced a new Republican map by substitute last week, which has been a source of much debate. Well, today it came up for a vote.
Today, I rise to present to you House Bill 873, which provides for the redistricting of the 4 Gwinnett County Board of Commissioner districts. The map contained within this bill complies with the law, ensuring one person, one vote.
For decades, Gwinnett County was Republican controlled, but over the last 4 years, flipped to Democrat control. And that's what many Democrats say is behind Representative Rich's maps.
The author of the bill made it clear multiple times in her remarks during our official public hearings on the original Board of Commissioner maps that she wanted a conservative Northern District. She admitted publicly on the record that her intent was to create a Republican district. That is partisan gerrymandering.
As you can see, just by looking at the map that I worked with reapportionment to draw is compact. There is no gerrymandering in this map, unlike the map that is proposed by the Democratic delegation, which divides the top 1/3 of the county into 3 of the 4 county commission districts.
I am looking for approximately 15 brave souls among my Republican friends who know that what I'm saying is true, who are willing to do the right thing and vote no on this bill.
But it didn't work, nor did a motion by Representative Sam Park to postpone the vote.
On the passage of House Bill 873, the ayes are 96, the nays are 70, and this bill has received the requisite constitutional majority.
Now, after the vote, Representative Park said, quote, "We lost the vote in the House, but the fight is not over. The bill now goes to the Senate if passes there, and the governor signs it. The Gwinnett delegation says they plan to sue the state." Another red-hot issue, Senate Bill 369, which would depoliticize Gwinnett school board elections. After Republicans pushed the bill through the Senate yesterday, Senator Nikki Merritt asked for a reconsideration again this morning. Well, the vote failed 20-35. And it's Savannah Day at the Capitol. Legislators will get the chance to eat oysters and meet with Savannah professionals at the Freight Depot this evening. And Donna, I really must run. I hear libations will be served. That is my Capitol report. I did my job. Back to you.
Oh, you better save some for me, okay? Right. Thanks, okay. Brenda. There's heavy Republican support in the House and Senate for 2 pieces of legislation that focus on girls' sports. In the Senate, there are 18 signers on the Save Girls Sports bill sponsored by Senator Marty Harbin. In the House, Representative Philip Singleton has a similar version. I spoke with him earlier about his bill, beginning with why he brought his daughter to the Capitol when he introduced it.
My daughter's 11. She's an athlete. She loves to compete. And she, you know, when I first started talking about this bill, it came up a couple years ago with the Connecticut issues with the track team. And we've seen issues across the country. We're blessed in Georgia. We haven't had any major issues in Georgia yet with it. But, you know, there was an athlete that was dominating the track and field that couldn't even place in the top 100 as a male athlete and decided to change their identity. And Connecticut decided that woke politics were more important than actual taking care of their children. And so they allowed this athlete to compete with a massive biological advantage. And he broke all sorts of records, the athlete, I should say, broke all sorts of records competing in women's sports. And so, you know, we're talking about that and talking about how we can prevent that in the legislature. And, you know, my daughter just said, Dad, I want the ability to work hard and be a champion. And there's a feeling amongst our youth, and it's prevalent in Georgia. We saw that with the amount of, you know, young female athletes that came out in support of this legislation that came here to the Capitol. You know, the stairs were full of young female athletes from across the state that they just simply said, I'm not political, I don't care about politics, I just want to be able to play fair. I just want to be able to compete in my sport, and I want the opportunity to be a champion. So the Save Girls Sports Act is designed to make sure that we maintain parity in our high school athletics, and really it's K through 12. But what it's designed to do is just make sure that we protect Title IX, we protect the right of young girls and women to compete fairly in sports, and it just simply says that for girls' sports, that girls will have to compete against other biological girls.
You've compared it to wrestling in terms of the way categories are made up. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's kind of a misnomer. There's some people that try to make this just about transgender athletes, but the reality is there are lots of sporting events where we prohibit boys from competing against girls for parity's sake. And so that's what we're saying is we're not specifying a specific gender. It's just saying that biological boys can't compete against biological girls. And it's because of, like we talked about in wrestling, they divide it out by weight class, age group. Sometimes some sports there's height differences, and so it really depends on your sports. You know, everything from pole vaulting to high school swimming to wrestling. You know, we divide these athletic events, especially when you're competing at the individual level, we divide them out by some characteristics to make sure that there's as much parity so that natural ability and hard work, that those things count in those events. And all we're saying is we want to make sure, you know, since Title IX in the 70s, it used to be 1 in 70 women were able to compete in athletic events. There was a massive disparity between men and women. Well, now it's 1 in 3 young women and young girls compete in athletic events and sports. And, you know, most CEOs in the United States, female CEOs, attribute a lot of their success to their collegiate athletic careers or to their athletic events growing up. So we want to see that parity to continue to be fair and make sure that our women have the opportunity and our girls have the opportunity to compete and be champions in their events.
So would a transgender person be able to compete?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the identity of an individual is irrelevant to their ability to compete. We believe that every single individual, every young student, every athlete should have the ability to compete in athletic competition. So this bill doesn't prevent a single individual from competing. All it's saying is that they need to compete in the category that most appropriately fits them for parity's sake, to make sure that, you know, a young male athlete, a young high school sophomore male athlete has a tremendous advantage, especially post-puberty, over a female athlete in things like lung size, bone density, muscle mass, the respiratory system, the way they oxygenate their blood. These are advantages that a young woman can't compete with in a lot of these events, that they're massive advantages. And we're seeing that now nationally play out at the Olympic level and lower. We're seeing that across the country. Now, it most commonly manifests itself with transgender athletes, which is the current movement amongst the transgender athletes to be able to compete based off of identity as opposed to biology. And all we're simply saying is we want athletics to continue to be about biology and make sure that it's fair for everyone.
What about those who say it's a solution in search of a problem?
I mean, I disagree with them, but I wish they were right. If they were right, then they can jump on board and help sure we maintain parity. Anytime you hear someone say it's a solution in search of a problem, it's because they don't really have anything to say about the problem that's trying to be solved. If it's a solution in search of a problem, then it's something that no one would oppose because there's no problem that exists. So what they're really saying is that it doesn't meet their agenda, and that's really a problem.
Republican Representative Philip Singleton of Sharpsburg, talking about the Save Girls sports bills. Now, joining me in the studio to talk more about this topic is Democratic Representative Matt Wilson of Brookhaven. Welcome to Lawmakers.
Thanks, Donna.
Glad to have you here. There's lots to unpack from that interview. So let's start with Representative Singleton's focus on girls' sports under Title IX. While the bill in the Senate deals with both genders, he zeroes in on just girls in HB 276, which would permit a person whose gender is male to participate in sports designated for females. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I really think that there's not a problem here in youth sports. We have studied this issue in the House. I serve on the House Education Committee. And for the last year, we've studied this. The governor's bill that was introduced this week is the newest version of this bill, but there were 3 other bills before that one. At no point have we found a single incident in Georgia where this would be a problem. The only reason that this bill has been introduced is because the governor is worried about his primary election in May. And so he's targeting LGBTQ kids and using them as a wedge issue so he can lock down the far-right Republican vote in his election. And I think it's very dangerous for these transgender students, and quite frankly, I think it's shameful.
Well, he says the transgenders, people can participate, but he's talking about those who are biologically girls, not those who are transgender and were males, right? So he's saying that this isn't anti-transgender, and he's saying that that it should be, you know, it levels the playing field for the girls out there. How do you answer that?
Well, we've heard this argument from Representative Singleton, all the authors of these bills, and I understand folks who are wondering about competitive advantage. But I think that those arguments are both illogical and hypocritical for several reasons. First of all, we are talking about such a tiny subset of students who are A, transgender, and B, athletes. We are literally talking about a handful of students in the entire state of Georgia that this would even affect. The other thing that we should talk about, and actually Representative Singleton mentioned in his comments, where female bodies are diverse bodies. So even if this were a problem and this bill sought to address the problem, it doesn't actually fix the problem, because you still have the ability of girls of different heights, different weights, able to compete against each other. And if competitive advantage were the intent behind this, why do we still allow parents to hold their children back for a year for a competitive advantage and still compete in youth sports?
Yeah, so what he's talking about, he's talked a lot about high schools, but this would affect the kids at any age and in any activity, not just sports, right, as you understand it?
That's right, that's right. And, you know, what's getting lost in all of this, the examples that are being given of professional sports and Olympic level sports, is those are so far removed from the local youth sports that we're talking about in our communities. The vast majority of students who participate in these sporting activities do so for their camaraderie with their friends. They do so for the after-school event, not for the medals and the trophies. They just want to participate and be a member of the team. And that's all these transgender students want to do as well.
Yeah, are you hearing anything from that community, from the transgender community, about these bills? Yeah,
absolutely. So I am not transgender, but I am a member of the LGBTQ community and have many friends who are transgender. And I have spoken to transgender youth athletes about this. And all of us in the LGBTQ community and all of our allies are very worried about just the conversations we're having about this legislation, because just talking about this creates further trauma against this incredibly marginalized group of students. We're talking about a group of students who studies show just last year 52% of transgender students in this country seriously contemplated suicide. They are facing an incredible struggle that most of us just can't even fathom. to have the courage to be able just to walk out the door every morning and be the person they are and they were born to be, and face ridicule and discrimination, and in many cases, physical threats of violence.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about Title IX. Explain what Title IX is, because he did talk about the fact it has done so much for girls when it comes to sports. Is this a way of taking that further, or is, explain why you don't think this is doing that, I guess.
Yeah, and you're right. I don't think that this is furthering the intent behind Title IX. So obviously, Title IX was incredibly impactful legislation that sought to provide equal opportunities for female athletes, making sure that sports teams were offered by schools and were equally funded so that they had that opportunity. We've come a long way since Title IX, but if Representative Singleton and his partners truly want to help female sports, let's talk about more funding for Title IX compliance. Let's talk about supporting more female coaches and developing those pipelines, because if you look at the Title IX compliance today, we see that it's still not on a level playing field with male sports.
A lot of support for this, certainly among the Republicans, a lot of signers on this. You mentioned that you believe it is political. It has come up before, but you believe that because this is an election year for the governor, that's why we're seeing more on this.
Oh, absolutely. And we're going to hear a lot about it. We still have 30 days until qualifying for the elections this year, so the ballot isn't even still set. I've been down at the legislature for 4 years now. 2 of those years were election years, and you see a pattern. Every 2 years, every election year, these controversial bills come up to give their authors and supporters a chance to go back out on the campaign trail and say, well, I fought for you. The sad truth, though, is who these bills are targeting and the incredible harm that it's going to cause and already has caused.
Well, I know you'll be watching it. We'll certainly be watching it. Thank you so much for being here today, especially by yourself, so I appreciate that.
Always.
After the break, my expansive interview with Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, where you're watching Lawmakers on GPB.
Cigna is a proud partner of Georgia Public Broadcasting and Georgia Lawmakers. Cigna's mission is to improve the health, well-being, and peace of mind of those we serve. More at Cigna.com to learn how you can help support your employees' physical and emotional well-being.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
Georgia Humanities, connecting people and communities across Georgia to encourage conversation, education, and understanding. Find out more at www.georgiahumanities.org.
We are the Southern Environmental Law Center. At SELC, we not only take on the toughest environmental challenges, we win, forcing the removal of more than 250 million tons of toxic coal ash, defeating repeated attempts to bring offshore drilling to our coasts, and securing clean air and water protections for communities across our region. Your most powerful environmental defender is rooted right here in the South.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I spent time today with Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. It's early in the session, but he's already had success pushing legislation in several areas, including help for those aging out of foster care. It's an issue he cares so much about, he did something unusual and spoke before the Senate Finance Committee himself. His other priorities surround tackling crime, and we talked first about the bipartisan support for the Law Enforcement Strategic Support Act, or LESS.
Less crime is an opportunity for us to empower communities to be a part of their solution by contributing dollars directly to their local law enforcement agencies through a foundation model. to do one of 5 things: either hire more officers, pay them more, train them better, equip them better, or use a co-responder model to help them be better suited to handle some of these mental health issues that arise in the communities.
You also have the Criminal Record Responsibility Act. Tell us about that.
Yeah, this is another, bringing a scalpel instead of a chainsaw to fix the problem of crime. One of the things that is, certainly helps us in this technology age is information. And I think the general public would be shocked to understand how backlogged the GCIC computer system is, which is really a record base that allows us to track somebody who's been arrested for something, and then some sort of judicial process has played out and created a final disposition. Either the charge has been done away with, or there has been some follow through by the judge. Right now, there's millions of cases that are not updated. And so we're trying to use this process of technology and accountability to require these municipal and counties to be able to update this information, so that if a judge is looking at a future case or an employer is trying to make a decision, they can look at this information and make an informed decision. We think it, once again, is a scalpel in trying to attack the issues of crime in our state.
What always interests me about this is it sounds like something we should have had before now.
Yeah, and look, there's all kinds of complicated parts to this, right? I mean, I think at the end of the day, you have 159 counties and cities and all kinds of different judicial circuits. So it's complicated. I certainly don't think anybody has completely taken their eye off the ball. Then you layer in a pandemic and a backlog of cases. This just gives us an opportunity to try to really focus in and really give accountability, so that these different agencies can upload this information and give us better information to make decisions on.
Let's get into something else. The Georgia Behavioral Health and Peace Officer Co-Responder Act. Long title, but something good for Georgians.
Yeah, so this was first brought to my attention with back home with my local sheriff, Ron Freeman, in Forsyth County, and they were working with a co-responder model. Not a pilot program, it was just one of the early adopters across the state, and there was a handful of other counties that were using this. But this is an opportunity for a deputy or a police officer or somebody in law enforcement that's showing up to the scene of a 911 call, where they quickly realize or recognize that there's some sort of mental behavior episode going on, whether it be some sort of sporadic or chronic condition. And as soon as they recognize it, they're not equipped to necessarily, they don't have their PhD or some sort of counseling degree on how to coach these people through this. And so now this gives them the opportunity to call a mental health professional on the site with them to help let them better understand what's going on and maybe try to find a peaceful solution through. And so 2 things happen. 1, better outcomes in those situations where certainly we want to de-escalate. But then 2, we get to better navigate that person to potentially somewhere better than just a jail cell for 24 hours. This maybe helps us be able to navigate them into a more finite therapy course for them. And so certainly that's better for them and better for the community.
Is this something law enforcement officers have been asking about?
Absolutely. We've seen both the handful of counties that have been able to utilize this for the last few years have championed and really been advocates for it, but also others responding, looking for opportunities. So 2 parts to this. One is we're creating the framework for statewide opportunities for communities to set this up. And then 2, through the Less Crime Act, we're using this as a funding model so that we can help fund these co-responder models inside communities to be able to stand up right away.
The Senate Finance Committee has also already passed the Fostering for Success Act.
Yeah, really proud of the committee hearing yesterday. It was a special moment for me. I actually went to the committee room and made the presentation. Myself, it brought me back to my old days of being a House rep, and certainly missed those times of presenting a big idea to a committee. Grateful for them passing it. And yeah, we've worked a lot on foster care since we've come in three years ago, because who else is going to fight for them? And so our life, my family has really kind of been a part of this foster care learning experience. My oldest son, Parker, is now a sophomore at UGA, and he's had some intersections in his life where he's got to meet some very good friends that have been part of the foster care system. This specifically focuses on kids that age out of the foster care system. So as I explained to the Finance Committee, just imagine you're 18 years old, your birth certificate says you're an adult, but you're not ready for tackling life or putting your own roof over your head or being able to take on a job. This is an opportunity for us to create a tax credit for $20 million to give wraparound services through approved agencies to help these kids navigate through the difficult parts of early life. That they don't have a family to pick up the phone and call when they hit some sort of crisis or health concern, or just need an arm to wrap around them and give them a hug and help them to their next opportunity.
I have to ask you about Buckhead Cityhood. The bill came up and you put it in the Urban Affairs Committee. Some saw that as a way of stalling the bill. How do you see it?
Well, I've been very vocal on this early and often, is that there's more than just creating a city. There has to be conversations about all the facts and figures and details around creating a city, like what happens to the school system, what happens to the bond packages, what happens to the other services that are out there. And I'm going to require anybody in this building that wants to talk about the city of Buckhead to talk about those difficult issues that are out there. I certainly don't hear this overwhelming conversation about solutions to those challenges. And so, yeah, we've put it in a very viable committee, Urban Affairs. Certainly the title fits, and the designation of that committee fits any sort of urban city that's being talked about. So certainly there's the chairman of that committee, Lester Jackson, is continuing to have conversations and gather those questions. If he wants to have a committee hearing, we'll certainly hear about that, and that's his prerogative.
You're a businessman, and the business community, a big part of the major business community up in Buckhead, has come out against it too.
Yeah, they're worried, right? They're worried it changes the trajectory of that real estate, and the dynamics. And certainly I want to make sure their concerns are heard. But look, we've got to just talk about more than just putting up signs that say "Welcome to Buckhead." We need to certainly put up, all of the answers to the tough questions that are out there. I don't certainly see any sort of energy behind those answers to those difficult questions at this point, but we still have 30 legislative days left, and there's, maybe some of those questions will start to be answered.
We've seen a lot happen in this first, 10, 11 days of the legislative session. I'm wondering what we still may see. One of the big things is always, it seems in the last few years, something with sports betting or something with gambling. Do you foresee any of those things coming up this session?
Certainly possible. It has never been one of my big areas of interest. Certainly I'm going to pay attention to the body, not necessarily my opinion. So if the chamber wants to bring some of those big ideas up, then certainly that's their prerogative. I do think we'll talk a lot about the budget going forward. We've got the amended budget that is kind of closing the books on last year's budget, and we've got the second part of that coming through, and then also the new budget coming forward. Governor Kemp has put out a number of initiatives as we support teachers and other state employees. We're in a record time. We've certainly navigated through a pandemic. Watching us balance lives and livelihoods has put us in the position that we're in today. But there's certainly uncertain times, and I'm certainly proud of the work that Governor Kemp and others have done so far in the budgeting process.
The budget surplus has been just a boon for the state in this legislative session, hasn't it?
Yeah, certainly. There's tons of money, and that's not just because of accident. That's because we budgeted very conservatively through the beginning and middle parts of the pandemic. Now, hopefully, we're on the tail end of it. We'll see economic activity kind of take its own weight. But one of the cautionary tales that I continue to tell folks are, look, these unprecedented, budget surpluses will not last forever. And so let's make sure through the budgeting process that we don't create, kind of unfunded mandates in the future. Let's make sure we take care of those that we need to in this period of time, where we still have some hay in the barn, but make sure we don't commit future legislatures into, very, very tough, difficult decisions if the economy slows down, because it will. Certainly, we all know that at some point in the future, probably relatively near future, we'll start to see slowdowns, hopefully in moderate formats, but certainly that's on the horizon at some point.
So you're not running for re-election. So let's talk a little bit about what's next and your legacy, you think, as you leave.
Well, I want to make sure that one of the legacies I leave behind is a hard worker, that we've really focused on putting policy over politics. I feel like that's really still in place, and we've got 30 legislative days to make sure that continues to be the case. That's important to me, that's important to my family, and I think that's important to our entire team here in the office. When we're done, we're going to look up and focus our political energies on this notion of GOP 2.0. It's certainly gained national momentum, and it's not just a Republican initiative. If GOP 2.0 is successful, it's going to hopefully make the rules of engagement between both parties more civil, more policy focused, with a better tone. And I'm grateful for the outpouring of support we've gotten from Republicans, from Democrats, from all 50 states that continue to send us notes and well wishes, and folks in elected office that have continued to tell us to keep the energy behind it.
But will you miss it at all?
I will. I'll miss the people. It's a lot like my baseball career, right? I loved playing baseball, professional baseball. When my career was over, I didn't necessarily miss the playing. I missed the teammates and the relationships. But you know what? I'm certainly going to continue to stay around politics. I'm going to continue to push this notion of a GOP 2.0. I hope to get the opportunity to serve again at some point in the future. It's just not going to be right now.
Thank you to Lieutenant Governor Duncan. No session tomorrow. We'll see you on Monday. Have a good night.